Education and Culture Minister Myron Walwyn has accused some parliamentarians of abusing their parliamentary privilege by making statements that would trigger lawsuits if they were made outside the protective halls of Parliament. Minister Walwyn stopped short of naming the likely offenders but says there is need for action. Delivering a presentation at the just concluded CPA meeting here in the BVI on July 28th, themed Challenges to Parliamentary Privilege, Where Do We Draw the Line? Minister Walwyn said the parliamentary privilege of immunity can be used for good and bad by legislators.
Parliamentary privilege, as I mentioned before, in more modern times relate to immunity from litigation from words spoken in Parliament. And the question is not only where do we draw the line, but also whether we have indeed crossed the line and whether that privilege to speak freely in Parliament without fear or litigation should be an absolute privilege. Immunity in Parliament is afforded to members so that they can carry out their duties to the public without inviting litigation upon themselves. It is important to note that this immunity operates only within the precinct of Parliament. Like anything else, the parliamentary privilege of immunity can be used for good and it can also be used for bad. I'm sure that many of us within this room have listened with much disappointment to our fellow parliamentarians maliciously call the names of private citizens without them having the chance to respond to callous and reckless accusations that are often made. In many instances, blatant lies have been told on citizens and businesses for political purposes, with no recourse for the persons so aggrieved. It raises the question as to whether or not members of Parliament are above the law within the House of Parliament. Many of the parliamentarians that use such a sacrosanct feature of parliamentary democracy in this way would not dare repeat the same callous and reckless remarks outside the precincts of Parliament for fear of being slapped with a civil suit. This is where the abuse resides and where I would say we have indeed crossed the line and it is time to do something about it. I am not alone in my views on this matter.
Under the Westminster model, parliamentary privilege allows parliamentarians to carry out their duties free from interference and grants them immunity from litigation for words spoken in Parliament. Parliamentary privilege has two main features: the freedom of speech without litigation and exclusive awareness, which gives Parliament freedom to control its own internal affairs. Minister Walwyn says parliamentarians must be held responsible for what they say.
Support for the need to limit this absolute privilege can be evidenced in the newly passed Defamation Act brought by Antigua and Barbuda Attorney General Stedroy Cutie Benjamin. Where the defense of absolute privilege applies, it is irrelevant if the defendant acted with malice, if the defendant knew the information was false, or acted solely to damage the reputation of the other party. With respect to this act, which replaces the Libel and Slander Act in Antigua and Barbuda, the Attorney General said that the defense of absolute privilege is excluded from the law because he believes parliamentarians should be held to the same standards as the rest of the people. In other words, as parliamentarians, we must be held responsible for what we say. It is commendable what Antigua and Barbuda has done, and as a region, we need not look further afield for a good example of implementing laws to better serve our constituents. I dare say that by being proactive with such changes in our practices, we demonstrate to our citizens and the wider political realm that we understand and we are willing to do what is necessary to maintain modern and open societies in our region to promote good governance and democracy for all.
Parliamentary privilege was given after the English Civil War of 1688, when the Parliament in the UK sought to operate without interference from the monarchy. In 1689, the Bill of Rights established the rights of Parliament, and the privilege was enshrined in the law.